morning, everyone. I am Kerry Hecht, the CEO and founder of 10K Humans, and we have a special guest today, Sunita Manwani, who I have known for literal decades. And Sunita is a recruiter for roles within the insights community. So Sunita, why don't you introduce yourself and your company and all that business?
Sure. Thank you so much, Kerry, for having me on. I really appreciate it. But I'm Sunita Manwani, as Kerry has introduced me, and I actually specialize in research and insights recruitment. Been doing it for many, many years. Kerry and I go way back. And, both of us have seen a lot of disruption in this industry, pretty dynamic shifts across tech and talent and just marketplace disruption. And, my role is to constantly speaking with candidates and clients and understanding both sides, both of their needs. Yep. And so Kerry and I are actually speaking about what those needs are, what the disruption is, and how I can help put it all together in understanding the perspective of both the hiring managers and the companies as well as candidates.
Yeah, because if you think about what you do, there really is an aspect of it that is translating, right? So making sure that yep. Candidates that are out there are speaking to the needs that companies are requiring. So we've got a list of questions, so I'm just going to go through. And thank you again for helping put this together. Okay, so first question is trends that you're seeing in the market research and insights job market right now. So what are they and how are they different?
Well, I think if we could just sum up both the candidate experience and the client experience, I think both sides can agree on a couple of things that they're seeing and experiencing. And one is definitely it's a challenging marketplace with layoffs, socioeconomic conflicts, political conflicts, tariffs, leaner budgets, yep. leaner insights teams. The second thing is that they're seeing is really the frustration with hiring managers. They're frustrated on the so-called lack of talent, yep. which really translates to skills and yep. the skills not being there. And then the third thing I think that is a common thread is that it is a very competitive market, no doubt. Competitive for the candidate who thinks that 800 people have applied to the same job. And it's competitive also for clients, for the hiring managers, because they feel that they have to shift through, 400 resumes. And that's why it's taking so long. And that's why the frustration has built up, where it's taking longer for companies to hire and it's taking longer for candidates to find jobs. So when we see all that, we're seeing, again, coming down the funnel of, these trends where there are leaner budgets. They're leaner budgets because companies have leaner budgets from their clients. Yeah. Companies are not investing and spending in insights or customer experience as much as they used to in 2022 and 2023. Yeah. So we've been going through this for the last 3 years. Yeah. And you and I have seen a lot of disruption from 9/11, the 2008 financial crisis, the dot-com bust, the dot-com boom. And, yeah. and everything in between. But in each of those scenarios, Kerry, we have bounced back as an industry, as a nation, relatively quickly. Yes. But this has been going on for 3 years. So I don't have answers. I don't have a crystal ball, but I am cautiously optimistic that things will turn around. And I have seen some glimmers of hope on it.
Yeah. So it's funny because we I was thinking about typical years, right? And I've thought about this actually since we've been in business, and so we started in 2017. So like for us on a individual company basis, the first 2 or 3 years that you're in business are not necessarily typical of anything. So you bounce against industry norms that you're aware of from previous, iterations of your career. And then COVID happened, right? Yes. And then, so everything has been completely atypical since then. And there was, of course, the massive amount of concern that people had when COVID started. But the industry kind of held solid through that, because I think there was a lot of opportunity there with so much research moving online. And then post-COVID, it was really a job seekers market. But that was, that was what, 2022. So you've got 2022, 2023, where it was much more, there was a lot of really, really, really solid candidates, and now here we are. And so it's like, it does feel a little like whiplash, like the cycle of things is just significantly faster than it used to be.
Well, on that note, the whiplash, I think it's occurred because, again, like you said, in 21, 22, there was massive hiring.
Yeah.
Salaries are going up the roof, but then you had those layoffs. So
yeah,
in
right.
21, 22, you had a lot of companies, and I had actually one HR person admit it to me, saying, Sunita, we hired way too much too soon.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear one of you admit it.
Yeah.
Because no one's admitting it. And so that's why we've not had this backlash of this downturn since then.
Yeah. I think a lot of companies fell victim to that, us included. And, I always aim to be incredibly transparent about the struggles that we as a company have, and, as an individual CEO that you have as well. And I think that there is definitely, a lot of pressure to tighten things up, speed things up. And it's not just pressure from internal, like from financial, like the own internal finances. It's pressure from what clients are starting to expect, right? Which is faster turnaround, lower costs. And I think the competitive landscape that any company is dealing with now is also changing, right? So, there's I think a lot to unpack there. So we'll go to the next question. And if we want to circle back to that, we can.
Sure.
So presently, what skills are in high demand, and are there any gaps that hiring managers are seeing?
Well, from a candidate perspective or from a client perspective, as far as the skills, believe it or not, what I call the holy trilogy of, analyzing data, providing a story, but also seeing the forest from the trees, not just being a research insights driven person, but also a business insight person. And that comes with time, that comes with skill, it comes with training and mentorship. But that is still the three core areas that any hiring manager in insights is looking for. As that problem is that since COVID, I've noticed that with the junior and mid-level candidates that I typically work with, putting that into perspective, the training and development has been less than stellar.
Yeah.
You're a hiring manager yourself. I'm sure you've been seeing it, but a lot of my clients are saying, look, Sunita, we know how tough it is. One or two of my clients is willing to teach and train. I'm like, really? Sunita, give me someone smart and I'll train them.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. That's not too bad. Okay.
Right.
But that is something that hiring managers are still struggling with is people who can see the forest from the trees and still have those fundamentals. Those are the must-haves. It's not the nice-to-haves anymore like it was years ago.
Yeah.
The nice-to-haves obviously is more the advanced analytics, the AI techniques. But, as an industry, we're still in the infancy stages of really becoming proficient in AI. What is AI being used for? Is it for predictive modeling? Well, that would be more of a data science. Is it for, the work streams? Well, that would be more of an insights person. So I would say still the foundations and the fundamentals of analysis, storytelling, and seeing the forest from the trees really are the skills that haven't gone away.
Yes. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that. So I'm on the conference circuit quite a bit. And, a couple of years ago, even as recently as last year, the presentations around AI were more about theoretically what was going to happen when it hits. And increasingly, you're seeing large brands talk about how they are using it, either from an operational perspective or a work stream perspective, as you put it, down to persona development and research design. Simultaneously, you're also seeing a lot more calling out of a phrase, work slop. And I'm not the person that coined that phrase. And Jay, my counterpart here, uses that phrase a lot, but it's really true, right? And and there was a LinkedIn post recently about it that talked about people were identifying as a report that had been put out as work slop, and then but there was still like 10 to 13% of the respondents felt like their colleague who produced the work slop seemed smarter. Now, I'm grateful that that wasn't like 50% of the of the respondents, but I think that it's an additional skill. So having those skills where you understand how to design research, execute research, ask the right questions, provide a story, and the business insights is obviously so incredibly important. I mean, it is what we do, right? That is our industry. But being able to identify when something doesn't have the depth that you need it to, which I think is a challenge for a bunch of different reasons. One, especially as younger people who perhaps were raised with AI are so used to using it that maybe there is some inability to distinguish between something that was generated thoughtfully, or something that was just kind of like slapdash together with a large language model, all the way to just the critical thinking that is required for that. And I don't think that anyone would at this point suggest that AI should not ever be used in those kinds of cases, but to help speed work along, right?
Mhm.
But I do think that it needs to be used as critically or thought about it needs to be used as thoughtfully as any other tool or assistant you would use to help you get to the finish line faster.
Yeah, that's the operative word. Use it as an assistant. Don't use it as the end all and be all, because I've been seeing that on a related and not related note. I've been seeing that on resumes.
Yeah,
I can tell when someone has written their resume using AI versus when I'm speaking with them on the phone, their tone, their language is very different.
Yeah.
And I could plug it into AI and say, okay, redo this for me, and it's the same thing. So it's disappointing when candidates feel that they can use AI as a substitute, and it's not a substitute; it's a guide. And AI has its purposes, and in the market research insights world, you're right about the more junior insights professionals. They're very tech savvy. So if anything, they're more, I think, embraced with AI. They're more adaptable. They're more willing to use it, but it shouldn't prevent our industry from using AI where it's at the detriment of our future insight leaders, where that's all they're using or using predominantly.
Yeah, right. And I think that we, as an insights professional, and having worked both in qualitative research and quantitative research, there's often we over the years, this isn't new, we've struggled to get clients to read reports or to do anything besides cherry pick the piece that validates their particular point of view, and I think that there's an increasing danger of that if the report wasn't designed thoughtfully. So now not only, you have to read it in order to realize that it is, whether it is something that has the right depth and has asked the right questions and given the right answers. So if we haven't been reading stuff for years, it doesn't bode well for, for what happens next. I mean, I think about all the years that, people have been trying to kill the PowerPoint presentation, because nobody wants to sit down and look at, 100 deck, right? So I don't know how this, evolves in the immediate term, where it's, we're still putting PowerPoint presentations together that nobody's reading, or are only reading like a headline here or there. But now that PowerPoint presentation has been written by, AI. So I don't know. It's like, I shouldn't be chuckling because it's kind of horrifying, but it's playing into a behavior that already hasn't been great, so it's becoming a problem. Okay, so so we touched on this a little bit already, but what are companies struggling with when hiring right now? And I'm going to tack a little bit onto this.
Okay.
So one of the things that I'm really interested in is how people are defining new roles, right? So if you think about hiring needs changing, and of course there's the foundational skill set that we have been discussing, but then additionally there are these new technical skills. Like, are they struggling with that? Are they, how are they defining roles, and what kind of new roles are you seeing that perhaps didn't exist before?
Well, as far as how they're defining roles, I don't think, I think the traditional job description hasn't really changed, which is
interesting.
a shame, because of all the technology and all the bells and whistles that as an industry we use. So job descriptions have become mundane. They really have. And there's nothing new. There's no energy, no sexiness to it. If you're going to attract attract potential candidates, there's got to be something new, fresh, exciting in these job descriptions, and I don't see it. It's still the same, I think, format or template that companies are using. As far as like roles and what we're seeing, it comes in ebbs and flows, Kerry, but lately in the last few months, we have seen an uptick in pharmaceutical custom research roles, both mixed methods, quant as well as qual, and that too is an area that is hurting as far as skilled talents. It's but overall, I would say hiring managers are still struggling with posting on their own, entering on their own, sourcing on their own. And that's why it's taking so long. It doesn't have to take several months. Using a skilled recruiter in a particular expertise helps manage that process in a shorter time frame. And believe it or not, it does save money. I think the misconception is that companies are doing it on their own to save money, but not really. If you could have someone but in that chair sooner, then you're speeding up your process, you're speeding up your business, you're speeding up your revenue. And that's what we're seeing, is that hiring managers are just so inundated with massive amounts of applications. And then on the flip side, not finding the talent, but they're not finding the talent because, as I mentioned earlier, the talent since COVID, it has deteriorated a bit. The training and development isn't there as it once was.
Yeah. And it's interesting too. So when you talk about the job descriptions, it being in the same format and they're not sexy enough, do you find the job descriptions are accurate? Right. So are they presenting the position, and they're presenting it in a way that is what they actually need?
It is, for the most part, it is accurate, but there are some areas, and this is where, like you mentioned at the onset of our discussion, becoming a translator. It is my job to translate that job description and really understanding what the hiring manager is really looking for. So there could be areas that are very unclear, such as advanced analytics or AI. It's our job to really understand, okay, but what is this candidate going to be using AI for, and for what purpose?
Right.
And so the job descriptions for the most part are clear, but I think where the struggle is having the hiring manager, the HR person, and the recruiting partner all on the same page.
Yes.
And many times there are internal struggles between the hiring manager and HR, and they're not on the same page. So, my advice is you've got to get clarity. You've got to have a vision and mission on these job descriptions, or just hiring in general. Because if you're muddying the waters or you're changing the specs halfway through the search, this is why it's taking so long. It's really providing clarity on what each person is looking for, and is it realistic?
Yeah, and I think there's like, even within our own organization, as we've automated portions of our back end, that's not it's not really an insights position, right? So then you're all of a sudden hiring external to your own industry and external to your own experience. So, sometimes you struggle to define what you need until you realize what you don't. And that's never a nice feeling when you're halfway to where you thought you were going to be, and you're like, oh wait, this isn't
right. Not working, right?
Right. And I don't know how, or I don't know why. Okay, so what advice do you have for job seekers who are feeling discouraged?
It is, I get it. It's so tough out there, and it's easy to feel discouraged, but if I could just share a few things, is don't be discouraged. If anything, if you're getting interviews, then obviously your resume is doing its job, because
Right.
the resume is the foot in. So you've got the foot in, you've got the interview. It's what happens after that I think a lot of candidates feel discouraged. They're not getting job offers. So you as a candidate have to take a step back, saying, okay, I got the interview, so what did I do wrong? What did I do right? And I think a lot of people are going into these job interviews not fully prepared for interviews. And that's where AI can help you. It really can. Use AI as your teacher, as your guide, and plug in the job description, plug in the hiring manager, plug in your resume, and ask AI to develop a list of possible interview questions and add your own voice. And I think, when I advise and coach candidates, I tell them, look, on the weekends, grab a couple of your insights friends and do mock interviews on video. And tell them to be brutally honest as to what you did right, what you did wrong, how you can improve. Did you ramble? Did you babble? Did you answer the question? What? And so I think people have to treat their job search like a project management life cycle stages.
Sure.
From the very beginning to the very end. And in each stage, there are concurrent steps. So reevaluate your steps, but before you develop steps to your job search, you got to figure out what your strategy is.
Yes.
And how you're going to approach that strategy. So I tell a lot of the insights folks, and they find it like an epiphany that, oh my God, that makes so much sense. I do this for a living. I project management is my craft. Apply those skills to your job search.
Yeah, I think that's really smart. And I think another thing to consider and roll into that, if you don't mind me saying so, is be inquisitive in the job interview. So, so firstly, as a hiring manager, when you have someone that shows up for the interview that doesn't know anything about your company, doesn't know anything about you personally, an extreme example of this too would be not understanding the difference between marketing and market research, right? And which pops up not often anymore, but it has definitely popped up in the past. Those things are really discouraging. But to a job seeker, so obviously the do your research, right? Do your research on the person, where they went to school, where they've worked previously, what was their path. And that puts you in a position where you can actually ask questions of the person that you're interviewing with. And when you ask questions of the person that you're interviewing with, you're obviously showing the innate curiosity that one would have. But the other thing that you get from that is they kind of tell you what you need to say when they start asking you questions. So if you ask them questions about the role, the company, the priorities of the business, the priorities of the department that they're in, and all of those the work that they're doing, then when they start asking you questions later on in the interview, or perhaps at a subsequent interview, you'll have exactly what they're looking for, in your file, in your brain at that point. And I think that's always been something that I've enjoyed when I've interviewed people on my own, when they're really curious about, the position and the role, but also is a tool that I have used when I was applying for jobs, is talk to them, let them tell you what you need to say.
Right. Make it about them. It's not about you. And then, I tell candidates all the time, even on your resume, it's not a laundry list of what you've done. It's what impact you've made. Yes. And I don't care if you have 18 years of experience or 18 months of experience, but at your level, you have created impact for that study, the audience, for that product. You do it every day in your life for your clients. So you have to then turn the tables and use those marketing skills for yourself. And there are very few insights people who can market themselves very well.
Yeah, I think that's so right. And it's also, if you think about when you take on a new job, the company is interested in exactly that. What impact are you going to have on the team, for the team? What are you bringing to the table? Um, it can't really be about what the company is going to do for you
Right.
in that first conversation, right? Not to say you shouldn't be thinking about that, and that shouldn't be, that's obviously why you're looking for a job, right? Is what that job is going to do for your life, and your family and everything else. But if you make it about that in too heavy-handed of a way, immediately, without showing them what you're going to be able to do for the company that you're interviewing with, you're not going to get very far.
No, no. And just, on another note of, feeling discouraged, we're talking about what to do, what not to do, what to emphasize. But on the flip side, also take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Take time out for yourself. You don't have to spend 8 hours a day job searching. Break it up in the morning, the afternoon, early evening, but definitely take time for yourself and care for yourself, body, mind, and soul.
Yeah, I think that is really good advice, and I think it really is so important right now with the level of stress that most people are feeling, kind of across the board. Okay, so what is the biggest misconception candidates have about working with recruiters? And after you answer this, I'm going to talk a little bit about how you helped me and very early on in my career, because I would imagine that it's similar to what you're doing now, but
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest misconception is, I have heard horror stories from candidates that they're averse to using recruiters. They've had a bad experience. They've worked with other recruiters. And I said, not everyone works the same way. Tell me, what was the pain points you experienced with, other recruiters you worked with? So
Yeah.
the opposite, or not do it at all. But it's I think a lot of times candidates feel as if we are only there for the clients, for the company. Yes. And that's really not true. You have to find a recruiter that's going to advocate for you. And there are plenty out there in the insights industry. A lot of my peers, a lot of my competitors, it's basically balancing the act of you, the company, and also you, the candidate.
Yes.
And the other misconception is that we're only looking to fill roles very quickly. And that's not true. If anything, in reality, it's about building those relationships.
Yes.
Whether it's early on or as it has matured, well, speaking of maturity, you and I go back so many years, but, building on that, I've worked with candidates who I placed 10 years ago, and I'm still working with them on their second role or third role. So I think that's or a couple of misconceptions people have, or candidates have, about using recruiters, is that they're only there for the company. They're only there to fill the role. They're only there to gain their fee.
Yeah.
It couldn't be farther from the truth. It's, as I said, it's about building those relationships and having a recruiter that's an advocate for you.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't speak more confidently in your personal ability to do that. So, I mean, I think you helped me find at least 3 different roles over the course of my career. Mm-hmm. And in each one of those, I definitely felt that advocacy, definitely felt like you wanted to understand not just what my goals were, but who I was as a person, so that you put me in positions or put me forward for positions where not only was I going to be a good match with a skill set, but also from a cultural perspective. I think additionally, people maybe they don't realize that you will help with resume building.
Yes.
So you will and you will help them tailor it to the different things that you're interested in. And so, I mean, I think especially for people who perhaps have not had very much experience in the workforce, maybe it's their first, second, third job, that working with a recruiter is really important, because that you are seeing, and I think about this sometimes in the same way that for what we do within our role within the Insights project lifecycle, we see all different companies with all different perspectives, with all different styles of working. And, our job is to often help translate that to, potential research participants. And so you see all different candidates, what's out there. What's out there at different levels. You understand whether or not a position and a candidate are going to be a good match, not just for the first 3 or 6 months or year that they're working there, but 4 or 5 years down the road. And additionally, you see all different companies with all different styles. So I think, the way that you should really be thinking about you more as like a matchmaker, right? And the idea is to make not in a disingenuous way, but to make sure that everyone is aligned and understands what the other person is bringing to the table, or the other entity is bringing to the table. And I feel like you've personally always done an incredibly good job at that.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's building trust. It is hard to, crack that nut, because people are adverse, or people are speaking to a stranger and they're not quite sure how much to share with you as far as information, or how much to trust you. So, it's building it over time, but it's also asking good questions. And I can't tell you how many times I have candidates say, wow, that's a really good question. I haven't been asked that before. I'm like, well, wait a minute, you're working with other recruiters. Haven't they spent time really getting to know you? And like, no, and they say no. They've spent 15 minutes to talk about the job, and then that's it. Yeah. So, well, then you have to then decide who to work with, who not to work with. Who do you think has your best interests at heart versus just throwing darts on a wall?
Yeah. And if you are going to be an oversharer like I am, it's better to be an oversharer with you. You can apply that filter when necessary.
Exactly. And don't let out those skeletons out of the closet.
Yeah. And a good recruiter will help you with that. A good recruiter will teach you how to interview well.
Yes. And also how to navigate the muddy waters if you have gaps on your resumes, or if you left a job without having a job, for whatever reason. So, we're here to help navigate the marketplace for you. And if you're stuck on anything, that's where a recruiter comes in. So there's no such stupid question. You're better off asking the recruiter before going into that interview.
Yeah, I think that's really, really an important thing to bring up right now, with there being so many incredibly talented people who, who were laid off, and often through no fault of their own. There wasn't anything that they, that they did to warrant a firing or something like that. I mean, of course, that's why it's a layoff, right? So I think that with there being, lots of layoffs in the industry over the course of the past couple of years, especially in the past year, I think that again, helping navigate those trickier conversations is really important.
Absolutely. And I've heard more than my share of tricky situations, from mental health issues to people trying to have, conceive a child, trying to have a baby, and they're too stressed out and they want to leave their jobs. I'm like, well, hold on, let's work through this.
Yeah, right. And again, I think that speaks volumes again. So, a lot of those conversations are from both the perspective of the company that's hiring and the perspective of the person who's interviewing for a role, are not conversations you either can literally have because they're illegal to have, from the side of a hiring manager asking questions. But so, if someone does have those concerns about how something's going to play out or how something is going to look, you are the person to have it with. Yeah.
It's trying to find that advocate, like I said.
Yeah. I think it's so important. And I love that phrase, that your role is one of advocacy for both the hiring company as well as the job seeker. So how can hiring managers make their roles more attractive in today's market?
Well, candidates really appreciate transparency. That goes a long way. Hiring managers need to be upfront about the expectations, the role, the growth. Why would this position complement this candidate's background or enhance it? So, entering is a two-way street. Companies have got to get away from the fact that, they're entering candidates, they want to see what the right match is, but hey, companies, you've got to sell your wares.
Yes.
And I'm not seeing that. I haven't seen that in years. You know,
Mm.
I think, insights folks are great at interviewing and asking the right questions, but they've got to ask deeper questions, because I don't think hiring managers are asking the right questions to really fine tune. Does this person have what it takes to make a contribution to my team? Do they have the skills?
Yeah.
The same flip side is candidates. Candidates also have to ask right questions, because you don't want a situation where a hiring manager is saying after 2 months, Sunita, this isn't working out. Or
Yeah.
the candidate to say, well, they sold me a bill of goods.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
then there's miscommunication. So I think communicating as much information about the role, the expectations, the growth, because a lot of the candidates, the junior to mid levels, it's compensation is still important. I'm not going to lie, but a lot of these candidates are very value centered around flexibility, growth,
Yeah.
training and development, mentorship. I hear a lot of that these days. So
Yeah.
that's something that, again, hiring managers can try and make attractive to them, and tell them about their internal lunch and learns, or their virtual lunch and learns, sorry, and how they're promoting growth, transparency, how they're promoting wins within their team. How are they, tackling losses within their team? Candidates want to be one with the team versus siloed. And
Yeah.
that's hard to do in a remote environment, but there are ways of doing it. But I think hiring managers have got to not so much make the role sexy, but it's all about transparency. And for goodness sakes, have a dialogue with these candidates. It shouldn't be a question answer session, but the more engaging you are with the candidate, the more it's going to be a win-win for both sides.
Yeah, I think you're right, and it's so important, because you see this like practically play out. There's been a couple times in my over the course of my career where you and other people at your level sort of hit a wall of possible increase in role and increase in responsibility, and you end up having to change jobs in order to get to that next level.
Yeah.
And I think that if you've been with a company for a few years, maybe that is sort of like a natural thing, but it's kind of unfortunate, right? That sometimes you do hit that kind of like mid-level or upper mid-level role, and then there isn't anywhere else to go.
Right.
And I think that is something that's worth considering. Sometimes it's hard to imagine what the next 4 or 5 years within a role is going to be like. But I think that with the way the climate is right now, presenting the feeling, if not the feeling, the actual reality that that you could be in for the long haul is really, really important. And even if it does seem like something is too many steps away, or too far away in the future,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're right. We can't predict, for any role what what's going to be like in 3 to 5 years. But hiring managers have to share their vision
right
with candidates, and that's not shared. It's still the standard, questions and answers. And yes, it can be dialogue driven, but hiring managers have to go a little bit beyond and share a little bit more about their vision, and how they feel that the research they do will impact, or how it has impacted their client's business. You've got to also share those stories. If you're expecting candidates to share stories of their impact, you, the hiring manager, have to do the same thing.
Yeah, that's really important, and I think that's very good advice. So what advice would you have to companies and to job seekers to make the hiring process better?
Well, for hiring managers, we touched upon this earlier. Make sure that, some of the most successful searches is when the specs are very clear. There's a clear vision and mission, and, there are no gray areas. The second thing for hiring managers is, I understand about posting yourself, doing it in-house, but if you need a butt in that seat sooner versus later, and you needed that person last week, then don't wait months. use an experienced, specialized recruiter, regardless of industry, who can get you there sooner. And believe me, you will save money sooner, because if you're having EVPs and SVPs interview, I'm sure if you took their salary and you did it by an hourly rate,
yeah,
that's costing you more versus finding a recruiter to send you these, to vet and source these candidates for you.
yes.
So that's what I would recommend to hiring managers. For candidates, I would say, don't underestimate the power of networking. You've got to do it strategically. Don't network for an ask. Network for a purpose. Go on these webinars. Go on these trade shows and learn of what the industry is doing. Talk to the speaker after their presentation and tell them what you learned. Tell them, how it inspired you. That makes a connection. This is a true story. Weeks ago, I spoke to someone. She's in clinical research, clinical pharmaceutical research, and she wanted consumer insights. And I told her everything that I tell candidates. And she said, well, I've been doing that. I've been sending outreach messages and no one's responding. I said, okay, well, first of all, have you been liking their posts?
Yeah.
Have you been following the company? If you're not following the company and you're not liking the individual posts or commenting on them, then these notes are coming from a stranger.
Right.
You can't do that. You've got to engage through LinkedIn, through webinars, through networking events. Then you don't become a stranger. And then these people will let you into their world. And that's how you've got to build the relationship. So for candidates, I would say your LinkedIn is an extension of your brand.
Yes.
Not a copy carbon of your resume. Although having bullets on your LinkedIn profile helps recruiters like myself, but you've got to brand yourself. So, that's some of the things I would tell people, because I'm seeing a lot of the juniors and mid-levels, they are not engaged on LinkedIn. I'm seeing seniors, I'm seeing you. And I'm like, okay, that's fine, but where are the juniors? And it's the juniors and mid-levels that are the future of our industry. And you've got to be known. You've got to be visible. You have to show people like Kerry that you are a force to be reckoned with, that you have an opinion, you've got a point of view, and you're hireable. But if you're going to be silent and stay silent, then unfortunately that job search is you're going to hear crickets.
Yeah, I think another thing, and I actually meant to mention this earlier, but it popped back into my head, was the value of informational interviews, right? Which is a form of networking, right? So if you are a job seeker, or you are imagining that you might be a job seeker in the not too distant future, reach out to people just to have conversations about what they do, what their role is like. And there's a couple of things that are valuable there. So one, you're dusting off any cobwebs that you maybe have developed through not having those kinds of conversations with people that are external to your organization or external to your immediate circle. So I think that that's important. And then, two, you're also expressing your interest, again, sort of going back to where we started with this, where you're expressing your interest in what they do and what their company does. And I've known more than one person over the years who have developed relationships that have helped them positively when it was time to look for a job, just based on doing that alone. And I think too, if you're new to the industry, or you're just out of school, or you are in one of your first couple roles, it really is important to figure out, what track you want to take, right? I think one of the things that's so interesting and unique about our industry is that you can do so many different things. I mean, if I look at even my own career, starting out on the phones and then working for a focus group facility and working, I've done a lot of different things from, a quant analyst to being a qual researcher to being a project manager to be, so all of those different things, and you're not going to love all of them. Right. And so being able to figure out where your interest lies through having conversations with people is not a bad thing to do for yourself. It's not a bad exercise to take.
No, especially in this marketplace, because you may think of pivoting.
Yes.
Well, before you do, of course you have to do your research, but before you pivot, before you decide I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, talk to people who are in the industry, who are doing this job already. I can't how many times candidates say, well, I want to do this, this, and that. I'm like, okay, but that's fine. You're tailoring your resume to be as such, but have you spoken to people who are already doing the job?
Yeah.
You may figure out, well, yeah, I like these aspects, but I don't like these aspects. Well, then you're going to have to redo your strategy then. So before you dive in, talk to people who are already in the industry. So for example, a project manager, there are a lot of project managers out there who are out of work.
Right.
Tell them, okay, but those positions are still there. Granted, the demand isn't there, but then, a project manager can, I think, easily pivot into a customer success manager role.
Sure. Yep.
So look at those roles, talk to people at these platform companies, and there's a ton of them at the platform companies. Just ask, introduce yourself, and tell them that, hey, you know what, you're in between jobs, you're a project manager, you're thinking of parlaying into a customer success role, but before you do, you love to know this, this, and this. You have 15 minutes.
Yes, exactly. I think that's so smart. Okay, so are there any standout moments or stories from your time as a recruiter that stuck with me? And if you do want to anonymize a few of our things and share them, you certainly can.
Oh gosh, you have another 2 hours?
I know.
The stories I can tell you. Well, there was several years ago, someone who had a field and project management background. She interviewed with the hiring manager. And somewhere, and this was for a project manager field role, and somewhere during the length of the conversation, I think it was maybe towards the end or maybe middle end, the hiring manager, a born-again Christian, starts quoting scriptures. And the candidate is sitting there nodding their head. And after the interview, the candidate debriefs me and says, well, this is what happened. And I'm shocked. I don't know how to respond. I don't know what to do. But hey, the recruiter in me says, okay, the HR person really needs to know about this. But the candidate was really cool about it. It's like, Sunita, it's fine. It doesn't deter me from this company or this position. So I actually thought the candidate was a pretty good egg about it. But you have to take it with a grain of salt, and companies have to be cognizant. You can't be doing things like that.
Yeah.
HR appreciated it, but I would say that would be the most bizarre that's ever happened. Another story is, like I mentioned, people wanting to quit because they can't conceive, and their doctors are saying they're just too stressed out, and they want to quit their job. And I'm like, no, let's develop a strategy. Maybe you don't have to quit your job.
That's a heartbreaking thing to hear too. If you think about
it was in an email of all things. I'm like, okay, I'm glad people have confided in me. But I told the candidate, look, you've given me a lot of information, but I do think this is a face-to-face conversation. So back then we used to meet people in person. I said, why don't you come over to Forum after hours? I'll be quiet and let's just talk.
Yeah.
And we developed a strategy. He did end up quitting, but then within that month, he and his wife were able to conceive. We started his job search. We crafted a story that was plausible without giving away private information.
Yeah.
And he's still in the business. So, it's again, that confidentiality, that advocacy, but the stories certainly go on and on.
Yeah, I'm sure from both sides, both candidates and the roles that I'm sure there's wild stories on both sides. You want to take a few minutes to talk about maybe some of the roles that you have available right now, and what kind of person should reach out to you directly and perhaps Forum more broadly?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as I said, I only focus on research and insights recruitment. And right now, the positions that I have are really all focused in pharma. Custom pharma research, mixed methods, qualitative, quants. For qual, I do need to have moderators. But the sweet spot is it could even be someone junior. So all these roles that I'm looking for are anywhere from 1 to 7 years.
Yep.
And the salary band, it varies. It's anywhere from 70 to about 125, 130. My colleague is working on more mid to senior level roles, also in pharma and also in CPG beauty as well.
Okay.
Obviously, those salaries are higher, and those are more like 10 plus years of experience. or 8+ years of experience. So, you know, we have seen, I mentioned earlier in our conversation, I'm cautiously optimistic. And that's what we're seeing. We are seeing more roles available, more so on the senior end or mid to senior end. And usually that's like a domino effect. So when we see the marketplace turn around, and I'm not saying we are turning around, we usually see those senior and mid-level positions filled first, and then it trickles down to the more mid to junior levels. And hopefully those will be coming more open in the months ahead, hopefully.
Yeah, that's exciting to hear. But I do want to ask you a quick question about pharma. So because I want to just make sure that people know, if this is true, that they don't necessarily have to come from a pharma background in order to be qualified for a pharma role. Or do you typically look for people who have some experience in pharma already? Because as supporting pharma work, we know that it's its own beast of regulations and skills that you need to have and that kind of thing.
It really depends. You know, if I'm looking for someone with 1 or 2 years for a junior qual position, then the restrictions aren't so rigid. But if it's someone with 3 or more years of experience, having that custom pharma experience is key, because, you know, pharma is its own language with the therapeutic categories and the regulations and the jargon. So if someone's going to go into pharma research, it's better if they've already been in that space, because they know what to expect.
Yep.
It's the ones that say, well, but, you know, they may feel healthcare is of personal interest to them, maybe because of something personal that has happened, or maybe because they feel that they're doing good in society. But then they get there, and then they have to understand the technical jargon and the journal language, and it just becomes overwhelming, and it doesn't work. So for me personally, as a recruiter, I prefer having someone who already has that pharma knowledge, because you want it to be a win-win for both sides. But again, it does depend on how junior that person is.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Okay, well, this has been phenomenal.
Oh, it's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, well, thank you for taking the time. And so everyone, Sunita Manwani with Forum Personnel. If you are interested in connecting with her, you can reach out to me, reach out to her directly. And when we publish this, we'll post the contact information. Okay.